Let me start by agreeing with everyone. Ocarina of Time is sad. It is famously, deservedly sad. You finish this game and there is a weight on your chest. And for more than 25 years, the way we have all described that weight is lost childhood. The kid grows up too fast, the forest is behind him, and the fairy is gone, and everyone nods and says, yeah, that is the one about growing up and what it costs you. That reading is correct about the feeling. I'm not here to tell you the feeling is wrong, and I want to say it plainly before I get mean about it. I love this game. I think it's one of the best things the medium has ever produced. The reason I've spent this long thinking about a Nintendo 64 cartridge from 1998 is that it earned it. But I have a problem with the word lost, because lost is what you say about your car keys. Lost means nobody did it. It means it just sort of happened, a natural process, kind of like weather. And I have played this game front to back, and I am telling you, this childhood did not wander off. Somebody took it. Several somebodies, actually. There is a chain of hands this kid's whole life passes through, and every single one of them belongs to a person who is supposedly on his side. So here's the thesis. It was not lost. It was stolen, and the thieves were the good guys. And the ending, the part everybody cries about, never actually gives it back. Let's start from the beginning, because the beginning is already the crime. The game opens with a child asleep, and a fairy is sent to wake him up. Not to ask him anything, to collect him. And the very first assessment anyone makes of this kid, out loud, is Navi going, "Can Hyrule's destiny really depend on such a lazy boy?" Sit with that. The destiny of the entire world is, as a settled fact, already resting on this specific child. Before he's awake, before he has said a word, the adults have done the math. The math came out to the boy, and the only open question in the fairy's mind is whether the boy is up to the standard. Nobody in this scene is wondering whether it is okay to put the world's fate on a kid. That part is closed. Then he gets summoned to the Great Deku Tree. And look, I want to be fair to him here, because he is dying and cursed and does not have a lot of flexibility. But look at what he actually does. He tells Navi, "Find our young friend and guide him to me. The fate of the forest, nay, the world, depends upon thee." The world? This is the tree talking to a fairy about a small child, and the phrase is the fate of the world. And then the kid walks in. The Deku Tree says, "The time has come to test thy courage." He does technically ask. He says, "Dost thou have courage enough to undertake this task?" And here is the thing that made me laugh out loud, because if you press no, the game tells you to come back when you are ready and asks again. That is not a question. That is a door that only opens one way with a question mark painted on it. The consent is decorative. So Child Link goes in, fights a giant spider parasite, wins, comes back out, and the Deku Tree, with his dying breath, hands him a rock and a war. He tells him about the evil man, tells him to go to the castle, and then tells him, "The future depends on thee, Link," and then he dies. And notice what Link gets out of this. He gets a job and an accusation, because the second he steps outside, another Kokiri named Mido, and don't get me on this one, I tried looking it up online, and there apparently isn't a consensus on how to actually say his name. Anyway, Mido looks at him and goes, "The Great Deku Tree, did he die? How could you do a thing like that? It's all your fault!" So, that is the first handoff. A dying authority figure conscripts a child, gives him a rock, points him at a kingdom, and dies. What a thing for an adult to do. And I know, he was cursed and he was out of time. But being out of time is a reason to do a desperate thing. It is not the reason it stops being done to a kid. Then we get to Zelda. And Zelda is important because Zelda is not dying. Zelda has options. Zelda is also a child. I want to be clear about that because it matters. She is a little girl, but she is a little girl standing inside an entire castle with a Sheikah bodyguard Impa, who is a grown, capable adult, and with the full apparatus of the royal family behind her. And what does she do with all that infrastructure? She recruits the other kid off a dream. She tells him, "I had a dream. Dark storm clouds were billowing over the land of Hyrule. A ray of light shot out of the forest. The light turned into a figure holding a green and shining stone, followed by a fairy. I know this is a prophecy, and someone would come from the forest. Yes, I thought you might be the one. I thought you might be the one based on a dream. This is the interview. This is the entire vetting process. And then she lays out the plan, and the plan is genuinely one of the most casually deranged things in the game. She goes, "You go find the other 2 spiritual stones. Let's get the Triforce before Ganondorf does, and then defeat him. Let's." Beautiful word. There is no let's. She hands him a letter with her autograph on it, and stays in the castle. The us in this operation is one unaccompanied child crossing an entire country to collect sacred artifacts from a mountain full of Gorons and the inside of a giant fish so that the plan the princess came up with can go forward. The kingdom's counter-terrorism strategy is a 7-year-old running errands, and the adult in the room, Impa, who could presumably do literally any of this, escorts the princess to safety and lets the kid go do the dangerous part. Does this game basically teach you that adults can be useless and sometimes it is just up to the kid to figure it out? Because that is the read. Over and over, a grown, powerful figure looks to a small child and goes, "You know what? You got this one." And Link does have it. He collects all 3 stones, he gets the ocarina, he opens the door of time, he walks up to the Master Sword, the legendary blade, the whole point of the quest everyone sent him on, and he pulls it. And that is when the theft becomes literal, because the sword takes him. 7 years later, the kid wakes up in the Chamber of Light as a grown man, and an ancient sage named Rauru explains what happened to him. And I want to read this one slowly, because the game just says it. It's not subtext. Rauru says, "The Master Sword is a sacred blade which evil ones may never touch. Only one worthy of the title of Hero of Time can pull it from the pedestal of time. However, you were too young to be the Hero of Time. Therefore, your spirit was sealed here for 7 years, and now that you are old enough, the time has come for you to be awakened as the Hero of Time. You were too young, therefore, your spirit was sealed for 7 years." Read that as a sentence about a child, and it stops being fantasy and starts being horrifying. The problem was not that he was too young. The solution was to remove 7 years of his life. Not to protect him for 7 years, not to raise him for 7 years, to seal his spirit, to switch him off, and store him, until the calendar said the tool was the right size. He did not spend those 7 years badly, he did not spend them at all. He was unconscious for his own adolescence, because the plan needed a grown man, and he had inconveniently shown up as a boy. And here is the structural hammer, the thing I cannot get past no matter how many times I play it. Go through everything I just described and find me the scene where somebody asks him. Find me the moment where any of these people, the tree, the fairy, the princess, the sage, sit this kid down and say, "Here is what this will cost you. Do you want to do it?" It does not exist. The Deku Tree's "Dost thou have courage" is a formality with one acceptable answer. Zelda, "Let's" is an assignment. Rauru does not ask anything. Rauru informs. By the time anyone explains the rules to Link, he is already 7 years older, and 7 years are already gone. That is the chain of custody. That is the whole thing. A child gets passed from hand to hand, and each hand is warmer and more well-meaning than the last, and not one of them ever stops to get his signature, because the entire time, everybody already knows he's the one. He was the plan before he was a person. Now, here's the part that makes it measurable, because you could argue, look, everyone in war gives something up. This is just what it costs to save a kingdom. Why single out Link? The game answers that itself, and it does that with the Kokiri. The Kokiri are the children of the forest, and their defining trait, the thing the whole village is built on, is that they do not grow up. Ever. They are frozen. They are functionally a control group. A whole population of kids held at exactly the same age forever, right there in the background, so that when one variable in the experiment changes, you can measure it exactly. And the one variable that changes is Link. He is the only one who ages, which means his aging is not a metaphor that you have to squint at. It is the single anomaly in the room full of things that stayed the same. You can hold him up against his own childhood friends and read the theft right off the difference. Which brings me to Saria, and the saddest 30 seconds in a game full of them. Before the kid even leaves the forest the first time, his best friend Saria meets him on the bridge and she already knows he is not coming back the same. She says, "I knew that you would leave the forest someday, Link, because you are different from me and my friends." And she gives him an ocarina so that he will remember her. "You are different from me and my friends." At the time it plays like a sweet thing a kid says. In hindsight, it is the whole tragedy in one line, because she is right, and she has no idea how right. He is different because he is going to age and she is not. She is standing on the child side of a friendship and she is going to stand there forever, and he is about to walk away from it and never be able to come back to it. When he returns as an adult, she is exactly where he left her, exactly as young, and he is a stranger in a tall body. The friendship did not end, it got orphaned. She kept it and he aged out of it. And then the game drops the other shoe, and this is the one that reframes everything behind it. When the kid comes back grown and goes to the forest, a little Deku Tree sprouts and tells him the secret nobody ever told him. It says, "That's because the Kokiri never grow up. Even after 7 years, they are still kids. You must be wondering why only you have grown up. Well, as you might have already guessed, you are not a Kokiri. You are actually Hylian. You are not a Kokiri, you are actually a Hylian." So let me get the timeline together, because this is quite gut-punching. The kid was a Hylian baby. His mother was dying in a war, and she carried him into the forest and left him with the Deku Tree. And he was raised as one of the forest children, which means his childhood was borrowed from the start. He is a refugee placed among a species of permanent children he could never actually stay a member of, because he was always going to grow, and they never would. He was living on that time that was always going to run out, and nobody told him. He spent his entire childhood inside a home he was structurally guaranteed to lose, and the adults knew that. The Deku Tree knew that. Let him believe he belonged there right up until the day that needed him to leave. So the childhood was not just taken at the end, it was on loan the entire time, and the lenders knew. Okay, the ending. The part we are all here for. The part where, supposedly, it gets made right. Ganondorf is defeated and sealed away, and Zelda turns Link, who at this point is a grown man, who has been a grown man for about a week of his own subjective experience, and she gives a speech. And I think this speech is the single best piece of evidence in the entire game, because it is an authority figure, in text, on the record, admitting the whole thing. She says, "All the tragedy that has befallen Hyrule was my doing. I was so young, I could not comprehend the consequences of trying to control the sacred realm, and I dragged you into it too." "I dragged you into it too," she says. The princess whose dream started the recruitment, whose plan sent him across the country, admits on screen that she dragged him into it. This is not me reading against the grain. This is the character telling you that she did this. And then she does the thing that everyone remembers as mercy, and I want to argue is actually the saddest part. She says, "Now, go home, Link. Regain your lost time. Home, where you're supposed to be, the way you are supposed to be." And she uses the ocarina to send him back 7 years to his own childhood, to before any of it happened. Regained your lost time? Hold on to that phrase. We are going to come back to it, because I think it is a wish, not a result. But first, watch what happens on the way out. He is back in the Temple of Time, a kid again, the Master Sword back in the pedestal, and Navi, the fairy, the one who was sent to fetch him in the very first scene, the one who has been the voice in his ear for the entire game, flies up to a window and leaves, wordlessly, no goodbye. The one constant companion of the whole journey just goes, and the game does not explain it, and she is gone. And then the last scene, and this scene is silent. There is no dialogue. It is soft and washed out, and the kid walks into the castle courtyard, and Zelda is standing at the window in the exact spot she was the first time they met, and she turns and she looks surprised, and there is a glow on the back of his left hand where the Triforce mark is, and the game freezes on the two of them and says, "The end." Now I have to be honest with you about something, because this is where a lot of people, myself included, want the game to say more than it does. The reading everyone has, the one that I find almost impossible not to have, is that the kid remembers everything, that he walks straight to that window because he knows that window, that the Triforce still glows on his hand because the years he lived are still in him, that Zelda is surprised Some part of her recognizes him. This is the emotional logic of the scene, and I think it is what the staging is reaching for. But I have to tell you straight, the game never says that. There is no line of dialogue in that courtyard where anyone confirms he kept his memories. It is a silent scene. Everything I just said, the walking straight to the window, the recognition, the idea that her surprise is about the mark on his hand, all of that is me reading the staging. It is inference. A strong inference, I think. The whole scene is built to produce it, but inference. I am not going to pretend that the text says a thing that the text does not say. So let me make the argument that it does not need it, because here's the thing. It does not matter whether he remembers. Say he remembers everything. Then you have a child walking around with the memories of a war, a grown man's worth of loss and violence, folded into a body that is 7 years old, and no one he can tell, because the war he remembers has, from everyone else's point of view, not happened. That is not a restored childhood, that is a haunted one. But say he remembers nothing, say it is a clean wipe. Even then, look at what does not come back. Navi does not come back, she left through a window, and the game never tells us where she went or why. The guide, who was sent to fetch him in the very first scene, exits without a single word in the last one. That is not returned, that is gone. The Kokiri do not come back because he was never one of them, and now he knows the forest was never really his to keep. He cannot go home to a home the game just told you was borrowed. Saria does not come back. Not really. She is right where she always was, frozen at the same age, and even in the best case, she is a friend he is now developmentally going to leave behind again on a slower clock, because he grows and she does not. The friendship's expiration date does not get erased, it just got reset. And the 7 years do not come back because you cannot give back years by rewinding a calendar. He did not unlive them. He never lived them. They were slept through the first time, and the send back does not run them again with him awake. Regain your lost time, as Zelda says, assumes that time is a thing you can regain, like a wallet. It is the nicest possible thing to say, and it describes something that cannot be done. That is why I called it a false restoration. The years come back on paper, the childhood does not, because a childhood is not a number of years, it is the not knowing, and this kid knows now. He has either got the memories, in which case the innocence is gone, or he has not got them, in which case he has lost 7 years in a fairy and a home and a best friend to a fog he cannot account for. There is no version of this ending where he gets the thing the phrase promises. Regain your lost time is the wish. It is not the result. So here is where I landed. Look at who got made whole and who did not. The kingdom got its future back. Zelda got to undo her mistake, and she says so. She gets to set the timeline right and carry the wisdom forward. The adults, collectively, got their happy ending. The war did not happen. Everybody who spent the whole game handing this child from one set of hands to the next got exactly what they were after. And the kid got an apology and a do-over that cannot actually be done over. That is the whole ledger. I dragged you into it too, which is true, and regain your lost time, which is impossible. An apology that is completely sincere and does not come close to covering the damage. And now the sincere part, because I mean it at the top and I mean it here. This is why the game is great. Not in spite of it, because of it. A lesser game sends the kid back and rolls the credits and lets you believe the reset button worked. Ocarina of Time sends him back and then shows you a fairy leaving through a window and two silent children who cannot really be children together, and lets the sadness sit there unresolved. Because the sadness is the honest answer. Everybody feels that weight at the ending, which is what I've been arguing for this entire video about who is responsible for it. But the reason you feel it at all is that the game refused to lie to you. It told you the truth about what saving the world costs when you make a kid pay for it. That is not a flaw in the ending. That is the ending being braver than it had to be. Link's childhood was not lost, it was stolen, and the people who took it were the ones who loved him. And if you're sitting there wondering what happens next to a kid who saves a world nobody will remember him saving, and then gets handed back a childhood that no longer fits, well, there's more to say about that. But that is a story for another video, specifically Majora's Mask.